Okay, welcome Programming 11. We're going to take a look at the answers to yesterday's animation exercises. So the first one here is the circle going down. So the way we're making that work is by defining a y variable. And then in the setup, I'm setting it to 0. I'm not too worried about where you started it. It might have been hard to tell where it started in the class, but just so you know that I'm starting mine at the top of the screen. And then here's how I'm using it. I'm using the y variable in the y argument of the ellipse. And then I'm making it increase by 1, which will move it down because of our upside down y-axis. And then if it's ever greater than 700, I flip it back to negative 100. Just want to make sure that everyone's clear about that 700. The reason why it's 700 is because my ellipse has a 200 diameter or 100 radius. So once it gets to the bottom of the screen, 600, it still has 100 pixels to go before it is completely off the screen. And then I teleport it to negative 100 to make it teleport just off screen, and then it'll continue moving down. So we get that nice gradual, descending, and it will go all the way off screen. So here we are getting close, getting close. It is y is now right there at 600, and now it's at 700, and then it flips back over to negative 100, so it's off screen. Okay, so that's the first exercise. The second exercise looked like this, and it was going diagonal, and diagonal just means we're changing both the x and the y. So notice that I have two variables. I have x and y. You actually can define this all on one line. If you wanted to do this, x, y, you can make as many variables as you want on one line. You can x, y, z, w, a, b, c. Like you can just separate them with commas and that will work. You can also do them on separate lines, int x, int y. That's totally fine. So notice that I have here started both x and y at 0 because that's just where I decided to put them. There's nothing special about that. Something bothers me about having them not in alphabetical order though, so I'll just change that. And then here I go. Here's how I'm using them. Both the x and the y are plugged into the arguments for the ellipse in the right place. And then they're both increasing by 1. And you don't have to use an if statement for both x and y. They'll both trigger when y gets to 700, or greater than 700, I should say. And then I reset both of them. Notice that you can put multiple lines of code inside of an if statement. You can just load it up with as many lines of code as you want. So both of these things are reset when we get to 700. So if we run this, we'll see it go across. Maybe I should make it go faster. So we can see it go across the screen, and then they both get reset to negative 1, so it continues to come off the screen. Okay, so that's the answer for the second puzzle. The third puzzle, what did it look like? I kind of forgot. Let's see. Oh, yes, one that's getting bigger, 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 and eventually disappears. So I have a width and height variable. Kind of turns out I didn't need width and height. I could have just made it the same variable. I could have just made h and w. Instead of having two separate ones, I could have just said ww. Bam! Like they're both the same. Even though this one's a height, I can just copy that value. Because h just ends up being the same as w anyways. So I kind of like that better. So I'm just going to get rid of h altogether. See you later, h. And I'm just going to use the w variable in two different argument slots. And that will mean that it controls both the width and the height. So this will be a little bit cleaner. Oh, I like that much better. Just shorter. So yeah, w starts at 0, which is why it starts off small. And then it just increases. And eventually, if it ever gets bigger, and I just eyeballed it, 850. I just guessed what that number would be. I didn't know exactly. But if it ever gets bigger than that number, oh, pardon me. I'm so boring. I'm boring myself. It's just really early in the morning, actually. But anyways, W I set back to 0 to start the loop again. Let's just accelerate this, make this a little bit faster so we can see it in action. pow, circle getting bigger, and then starting over again, small. So the technique between any one of these animations is pretty similar, right? It's just a matter of really the only thing that's changing is what is my variable called, or how many do I have? What's the starting value? What argument do I put it in? What's argument slot? How does it change? And when do we reset the loop? Those are really the only things that are changing. Otherwise, the structure of these programs is very similar. Let's look at another one that'll probably be also similar. What's this one? I don't know. Let's find out. Oh, it's going backwards. Oh, yeah. So, how do you go from right to left? So, the answer is basically the same thing as you were doing before. I'm just going to start the x variable on the right hand side, so I give it a larger value, and then check it out. I have x in my x coordinate slot, and then I'm just decreasing it. I'm saying x equals x minus 1, so it's counting down, 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 down. And then check out my if statement. This is probably the hardest part. Notice that we're checking to see if x is ever less than now. In the previous ones, whichever one, it was always greater than. We're always looking for if it gets greater than. But we're going down, so we want to make sure if we ever see if it gets less than a certain number. That's how we're going to trigger the loop. So for this one, we're looking to see if x ever gets less than negative 100. If so, we reset it to 700. So it's sort of the opposite of what we were doing before in terms of the numbers, but the same concept. And we got to use a different operator here. I'll change this to like 5 or something just so we can go faster, and we'll see what it looks like. Yeah, there it goes. And then it gets to negatives 100, and we put it back to 700, and it creates that nice loop of animation. Okay, we got 2 more, I think. This one. Sorry, close that. So this one is, oh yeah, the growing circle. So this one I did use 2 variables, and I have a radius, I guess, and an x. So it's obviously moving across the screen, so that's important. Both of them I set to 0 at the beginning, because it's going to start off small and on the left-hand side. And then I just stick in x, and then r and r. I guess r is kind of a bad name, hey? It's not really a radius, it's a diameter. So I'm just going to change that variable name. I'm going to rename it to d for diameter. That's a better name. So I'm increasing x by 5 each time, and I'm increasing d by 1. So this is how fast it moves across the screen, and this is how fast it grows. Either way, whenever I get to 700, whenever x gets to 700, then I reset both the x and the d to start off small again. So that's why I get that loop happening. So it expands, eventually x gets to 700, and I reset x and d back to the beginning values. So that's how I create that one. See how they're all very similar? It's really just, where you're plugging in those arguments, how you're changing the variables, and, how you're resetting them, how you're initializing them. That's really the only things that can change. Last one, we had 2 circles going in all opposite directions. So that's a little bit more tricky and sneaky. So what's going on there? I mean, you probably, if you can do one of them, you could probably do the other one, but they are a little bit trickier. So I have 2 y coordinates, one for each ellipse. One I start at the top of the screen, and the other one I start at the bottom of the screen. And then they're plugged into 2 separate ellipse functions to create 2 different circles. And then one is going down when I'm increasing its value, and the other one is going up when I'm decreasing its value. And then I only use one of them. I could have made 2 if statements, but if one gets to 700, the other one is going to be at its place. So I just use one if statement to control both of them. So when I see the one going down gets to 700, I reset both of them at the same time. And that's how I get that. Maybe I'll just make it a little bit faster so we can see the looping in action. So that one if statement is going to trigger the teleport for both of them, and I think that seems pretty reasonable way to do it. So there's the answers to our practice exercises. I hope they make sense. If they still don't make sense, then I would recommend asking a question either to someone in the class, or you could post in Teams. You can send me an email. But if there's something you just don't quite understand, it's really important to probably solve that problem, today. At least ask that question today, because we're going to start the animation project today as well. So if these ones don't quite make sense, the project probably will be a little bit tough as well. Okay, so let me know if I can answer any questions for you, either on Teams, email, whatever way you want to ask me a question will be great. Okay, thanks everybody. Bye bye.